Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So, if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and I give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times. So, stick around. So, if you remember last episode, we read Mosiah chapter 9, in which we start the record of Zeniff. So, from chapter 9 all the way to chapter 22, we are in the record of Zeniff. So, once Zeniff and his homies left Zarahemla, to all the way when Ammon found Limhi in the land of Nephi, we're going to read those intervening years of records. So, we're going to see what happened with Zeniff, we're going to see what happened with Noah, and then we're going to see what happened a little bit with Limhi. So, we started that off by just talking about how the people of Zeniff got enslaved by the Lamanites, and how they got bamboozled by them to start giving them tributes. And by the end of the chapter, they did eventually get to fight them off. Anyways, go back, listen to that if you haven't already. It's very, very cool. But yeah, I think without further ado, we start Mosiah chapter 10. And it came to pass that we again began to establish the kingdom, and we again began to possess the land in peace. And I caused that there should be weapons of war made of every kind, that thereby I might have weapons for my people against the time the Lamanites should come up again to war against my people. And I set guards round about the land, that the Lamanites might not come upon us again unawares and destroy us. And thus I did guard my people and my flocks, and keep them from falling into the hands of our enemies. Note here, they're only defending. They're not attacking the Lamanites back in retribution. Like, they already decimated the Lamanites. They killed thousands of them last chapter. They don't need to go and attack them. They're just defending, which I believe is the right thing to do. I don't think you should attack people without cause. And it came to pass that we did inherit the land of our fathers for many years, yea, for the space of 22 years. And I did cause that the men should till the ground, and raise all manner of grain, and all manner of fruit of every kind. And I did cause that the women should spin, and toil, and work all manner of fine linen, yea, and cloth of every kind, that we might clothe our nakedness, and thus we did prosper in the land. Thus we did have continual peace in the land for the space of 22 years. 22 years of peace? With Lamanites right there that hate you? That is wild. Oh my goodness, 22 years. If I were the Lamanites, I would not want to attack again for decades, because last time that the Lamanites fought the Nephites, more than 10 Lamanites died for each single Nephite that died. So I wouldn't try my hand at that again either if I were the Lamanites, to be honest. And it came to pass that King Laman died, and his son began to reign in his stead. And he began to stir his people up in rebellion against my people. Therefore they began to prepare for war, and to come up to battle against my people. But I had sent my spies out round about the land of Shemlon, that I might discover their preparations, that I might guard against them, that they might not come upon my people and destroy them. It's kind of fun here, because in the beginning of chapter 9, we read last time, Zeniff was a spy among the Lamanites for the people of Zarahemla for a while. And he saw good in the Lamanites, which we talked a lot about in that chapter. But it's funny because I think because he was a spy, he understands their value a little bit, and so he uses them against the Lamanites because he understands how powerful it is to have spies among your enemies, because he was one, and so it's kind of cool to see that potential connection of maybe he wanted to use spies because he knew how good they were because he was one. Anyways, kind of a fun little connection. Also, it's kind of funny how only when King Laman died and his son took the throne, only then did the Lamanites attack again, because I think that King Laman was thoroughly scared straight by that last battle they had, and his son didn't learn that lesson, and so he's the one that's willing to go and attack. So it's kind of funny to see that they apparently traumatized the crap out of King Laman because he did not attack again for the rest of his kingship. Oh my goodness, wild. And it came to pass that they came up upon the north of the land of Shilom, with their numerous hosts, men armed with bows, and with arrows, and with swords, and with scimitars, and with stones, and with slings, and they had their heads shaved, that they were naked, and they were girded with a leathern girdle about their loins. By the way, small note, in my Bible class I'm in right now, I'm in a New Testament class, and my teacher talked about how naked, in like ancient times, in ancient Hebrew, used to just mean like nothing waist up. And so when they say that these people were naked, even though they're wearing loincloths, that makes sense to these people, because the word only meant waist up naked. So they were shirtless, but they were wearing loincloths, so they were quote-unquote naked, but not our modern definition of naked. It's kind of an interesting detail. And it came to pass that I caused that the women and children of my people should be hid in the wilderness, and I also caused that all my old men that could bear arms, and also all my young men that were able to bear arms, should gather themselves together to go to battle against the Lamanites, and I did place them in their ranks, every man according to his age. And it came to pass that we did go up to battle against the Lamanites, and I, even I, in my old age, did go up to battle against the Lamanites. And it came to pass that we did go up in the strength of the Lord to battle. Now the Lamanites knew nothing concerning the Lord, nor the strength of the Lord. Therefore, they depended upon their own strength. Yet they were a strong people, as to the strength of men. So I like in 10 and 11 how it talks about how the Nephites went to battle against the Lamanites in the strength of the Lord. Their strength did not come from themselves. Their strength came from the fact that they were backed by God. That's pretty awesome. But it's also interesting how in verse 11 it says, the Lamanites were a strong people as to the strength of men. And so they do acknowledge, the Lamanites were strong, but it was only the strength of men. It was not the strength of God. And it's so fun to see that distinguished in such a clear way. Because the strength of God is, I'm not going to say supernatural, but it's definitely different than the strength of men, right? So it's kind of cool to see that, yes, the Lamanites were strong according to the strength of men, but they did not have God, and therefore they would not be successful. They were a wild and ferocious and a bloodthirsty people, believing in the tradition of their fathers, which is this, believing that they were driven out of the land of Jerusalem because of the iniquities of their fathers, that they were wronged in the wilderness by their brethren, and they were also wronged while crossing the sea. And again, that they were wronged while in the land of their first inheritance, after they had crossed the sea. And all this, because Nephi was more faithful in keeping the commandments of the Lord. Therefore he was favored of the Lord, for the Lord heard his prayers and answered them, and he took the lead of their journey in the wilderness. So it's so interesting to see the records that we read in 1 Nephi, and that story that we learned about, how the family of Nephi left Jerusalem and got the plates of Laban and crossed the sea and settled in the Americas. We read it from Nephi's perspective, and now it's so interesting to see those same stories codified in kind of the general mythos of this people. The Lamanites believed that they were wronged, that Laman and Lemuel were wronged by Nephi, and the Nephites are like, no, Nephi was just faithful. But it's so interesting that what's still keeping them apart is what kept Laman and Lemuel and Nephi apart those hundreds of years ago. And it's cool how they're still arguing about that. Well, it's not cool, but it's kind of neat to see how those events that we read about so many chapters ago are echoing hundreds of years later, and how it's become part of their culture, part of their heritage, part of their history. And this because they were wroth with him, because they understood not the dealings of the Lord. They were also wroth with him upon the waters, because they hardened their hearts against the Lord. And again they were wroth with him when they had arrived in the promised land, because they said that he had taken the ruling of the people out of their hands, and they sought to kill him. And again they were wroth with him, because he departed into the wilderness as the Lord had commanded him, and took the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass, for they said that he robbed them. And thus they have taught their children that they should hate them, and that they should murder them, and that they should rob and plunder them, and do all they could to destroy them. Therefore they have an eternal hatred towards the children of Nephi. For this very cause has King Laman, by his cunning and lying craftiness, and his fair promises, deceived me, that I have brought this my people up into this land, that they may destroy them. Yea, and we have suffered these many years in the land. Now I, Zeniff, after having told all these things unto my people concerning the Lamanites, I did stimulate them to go to battle with their might, putting their trust in the Lord. Therefore we did contend with them face to face. And it came to pass that we did drive them again out of our land, and we slew them with a great slaughter, even so many that we did not number them. And it came to pass that we returned again to our own land, and my people again began to tend their flocks, and to till their ground. And now I, being old, did confer the kingdom upon one of my sons. Therefore I say no more, and may the Lord bless my people. Amen. Like I already talked about, the coolest thing about this chapter is how the Lamanite hate for the Nephites is explained. It's justified, even though that justification is irrational. It's got a reason. There is a reason behind it. They don't just hate the Nephites because they hate the Nephites. They hate the Nephites because they think that their fathers were wronged by Nephi. So, anyways, it's so interesting how, again, events that happened hundreds of years before are still holding importance to these people and their culture now, in this present day that we're reading. It's very, very cool to think about that. And also, again, this is from the Nephite perspective. This is the Nephite interpretation of how the Lamanites feel. But it feels like it makes sense, because even back in Nephi's time, Laman and Lemuel were super salty and were super angry about Nephi taking control of everything in their eyes, unjustly, as they thought. And now Laman and Lemuel's feelings about Nephi were repeated and repeated and repeated throughout the generations, so that now the Lamanites as a whole hate the Nephites as a whole, just because of this shared history that they have. So the stand-up verse for this chapter is going to be actually 2 verses, and I'm going to talk about the relationship. So the first verse that I want to talk about is verse 4, which says, "And I did cause that the men should till the ground, and raise all manner of grain, and all manner of fruit of every kind." And then later I also want to talk about verse 21 at the very end of the chapter, where he says, And it came to pass that we returned again to our own land, and my people again began to tend their flocks and to till their ground. So it's cool to see in verse 4 and verse 21 the before-math and the aftermath of the battle that they had with the Lamanites. Before-math is totally a word, and you cannot convince me otherwise. But it's cool because they returned to normalcy. They were like, well, now we're done fighting the Lamanites. We're not going to attack them out of revenge. We're not going to, build up our army to attack them more. We're just going to go back and, tend our fields, tend our flocks, and just keep chugging along. It's kind of interesting to see that return to normal. And that they still have that, drive to work for what they want and to work for what they have, and as opposed to the Lamanites, who are trying to freeload off of the Nephites' work by taking tributes from them, as we see King Limhi's people suffer with. So anyways, it's kind of cool to see that the Nephites are hardworking. They farmed and they had flocks before the battle, and they're farming and having their flocks again after the battle. The people that are returning from war and from battle just go back to their farms and keep working, keep subsistence farming. They changed, yes, because they went to war, but they also just came back, and things were as they were before. And, they aren't carrying a grudge like the Lamanites are. They're just working. I think that this lack of grudge carrying is something that we can also learn from, and also their clear cultural importance that they place on industry and work to get what you want. Again, this is contrasted against the Lamanites, who are described as lazy freeloaders, basically. If I had just returned to war, I would want to have a break. I'd be like, honey, you can tend the flocks today. I just came back from war. I'm gonna go take a nap. But no, they might have. But, in general, they just came back and lived their industrious lives, They're hardworking and they don't hold grudges. I think that's kind of what we can learn from this. So anyways, that was the episode. Thank you so much for listening. This was a really cool chapter, and once again, I'm so jazzed to be reading the Record of Zenith, because I think it's cool that we learn about things and then sometimes we go back and we learn about the backstory of those things that we learned about. So I love doing that because it increases the context and it broadens the view that we have of this world. So anyways, there are just a few links in the show notes that I want to talk about. The top 3 are different versions, digital versions of the Book of Mormon. So if you want to read along, whether along with the podcast or just by yourself, you should do that, because the Book of Mormon is great. And then you'll be able to catch the few times that I accidentally misread 1 or 2 words in a verse, which does happen. And I catch it when I edit, but they're not big enough to change. So anyways, there's also a Let Me Know What You Learned link. So if you want to let me know what you learned, shocker, then you can by sending a message to me there, because I will see it. Thirdly, there is a quick support the show link. So if you want to shoot me a few bucks, support what I do, because I do love making this podcast, you can go ahead, click that. And finally, we're on YouTube, so if you want to subscribe there, find some extra content, and also listen to the podcast there, because it does get uploaded there twice a week, then yeah, go ahead and do that. But again, thank you so much for listening to my wild, nerdy ramblings about the Book of Mormon, because there's so much to talk about. Thank you again for listening. I hope you're having a delightful day. And yeah, I think that's all I have for you today. Talk to you later. Bye.